Thank you for the reminder. We are now recording.
Alrighty. Well, thanks to those of you who are joining us. Welcome to WordPress Tools for your Newsmatch campaign. My name is Julia Smith, and I'm the Director of INN Labs, and I'm joined today by Ben Keith, our News Apps developer.
Hello.
Who was the lead dev on the two plugins that we'll be talking about. And for anyone unfamiliar, INN Labs is the product and technology arm of INN. So we're a small but mighty team of 4 that works to develop technical solutions for INN's membership. We tend to focus on WordPress development, creating themes like Largo, and then building plugins to incorporate additional functionality into a website. We always aim to build tools so that they're broadly useful and can be used repeatedly across the network. So we take a build once, deploy broadly sort of approach. And then additionally, we work with individual members on custom website solutions and general support. And just some logistics for this call. Go ahead and use the chat to ask questions, and we'll pull from that for a Q&A at the end. And we will be recording this session, and slides will be sent out after the webinar is concluded. So the agenda for today. First of all, why these plugins? How did they come about? What are they? Why did we build them? We'll get into some background info for you, and then we'll move into demos. So Ben will take the lead and demo both the Newsmatch plugin basics plugin, as well as the Newsmatch donation shortcode, and then we'll just head into questions. So why these plugins? The Newsmatch 2017 partner organizations came together to brainstorm ways to help participants maximize their year-end fundraising. And much of that conversation centered around the technical hurdles that news organizations run into when they're working to implement fundraising functionality on their websites. So both INN and the News Revenue Hub had been working with organizations individually, but the scope of the work that we could accomplish one-on-one with folks in this year-end timeframe was pretty limited without developing more broadly applicable solutions. So for example, the News Revenue Hub had been doing great work preaching the value of simple user-friendly donation forms, and also talking about unobtrusive modal pop-ups for donation buttons and email newsletter signups. So we decided to take some of that great work and build it into something repeatable and customizable so that any organization on WordPress could use those tools and work with them without needing to custom code any extra solutions. And that's how we came to develop the Newsmatch Pop-Up Basics and Newsmatch Donation Shortcode plugins. Newsmatch Pop-Up Basics is an add-on for the popular Pop-Up Maker plugin. So it automatically generates a minimal responsive modal alert for user-friendly newsletter signups. And Newsmatch Donation Shortcode allows you to configure donation levels to match your organization's existing membership program if you have one. And then it generates a donation form based on those membership levels and hooks into the News Revenue Hub's donation system. So that plugin is at the moment specifically for News Revenue Hub members, but in the coming weeks we'll be working to add support for PayPal as well. And while these plugins were built with Newsmatch in mind, there's nothing that limits their use to this year's Newsmatch campaign period. So you'll be able to use them well beyond the end of the year. And in fact, you don't even need to be an official Newsmatch participant to take advantage of them. They are just general utilities to help with accepting donations and building your subscriber lists. Now on to the demos. We'll switch it over to Ben.
All right, well, you're going to have to stop screen sharing so I can take over. All right, everyone can see this okay? The hideous mess that is my desktop with a bajillion individual icons over here. All right, so we're going to start, as Julie said, with the Newsmatch pop-up basics. I'm going to walk you through the installation process and then configuring your pop-ups, and then we'll move on to donation shortcode and putting that into a pop-up. So to start, we've listed the plugins on WordPress.org plugin repository. So, what that means is that you can just use the add new button on your WordPress plugins settings page. If you don't have the Add New button, you're going to want to talk to your tech support. We can install that for you, or if you're hosted by someone else, they can install that for you. Go to the Add Plugins page, and like Julie said, Newsmatch Plugin Basics plugin depends upon Pop-Up Maker, so we have to install that first. There are a ton of pop-up plugins in the WordPress.org plugins repository, but the one that we're using is Pop-Up Maker by WP Pop-Up Maker. So we will have to install it and then activate it. When you activate Pop-Up Maker, it will take you to a consent screen to allow Pop-Up Maker to contact you with certain forms of notifications. We have a blog post talking about the Pop-Up Maker, well, not about Pop-Up Maker plugin, but the Newsmatch Pop-Up Basics plugin that includes a link to what all you're consenting to here, or you can just click what permissions are being granted down here. Feel free to click skip. It doesn't actually affect how the plugin works for you. When you first install Pop-Up Maker, you'll note that there are no pop-ups. So now we're going to go back to the plugins page and install Newsmatch Pop-Up Basics. So now the plugin is activated. If you go back to Pop-Up Maker and all pop-ups, you'll see that there's a new draft pop-up, the Newsmatch default pop-up. So let's edit that. It looks a lot like the WordPress standard post editor, but it has a lot more boxes. The Pop-Up Maker plugin's documentation is, from what we found, very thorough and very well illustrated. So if you have questions here, you can look at the Pop-Up Maker documentation. They link to it from their site, but we also link to it from the blog posts. Our default settings for the pop-up, it uses the default theme, which we'll get into a little bit later. It has a trigger that opens the pop-up after 25 seconds of someone being on a web page. You know, it's not a pushy pop-up. It's one that appears when people are actually interested in what you're writing. If they choose to dismiss it, they won't see it again this year. That's, you know, you don't want to be too aggressive, shall we say. Otherwise, people just stop visiting your site. It is large at 80% of the width of the browser, but it's only as tall as it needs to be. And we've set it to disable the overlay, which means that when the pop-up appears on the page, people can still interact with the page. They can scroll. The pop-up does not prevent them from interacting with your site. It slides up over a little bit less, a little around a third of a second from the bottom of the screen. That's really just meant to be very, it's not meant to get in the reader's way, put it that way. And the rest of it is just controls for how it appears, you know, make sure that it has a close button. We don't provide a default pop-up, well, a default chunk of content for the pop-up. We just say, hey, the possibilities here are endless. You know, change the name of the pop-up, add a title, add a newsletter sign up. All of this can be edited. If you set a pop-up title, then that will appear on the pop-up when it hits your page. We've also set it to only show on the home page. You can add other pages that the pop-up can appear on, or you can choose different sorts of conditions. For example, let's see, it can appear on posts that have certain tags. All right. But the Pop-Up Basics plugin also includes a couple of other targeting things. If you come over here to the Pop-Up Maker menu, I'll make my screen a little bigger so you can see it. We have the Newsmatch Pop-Up Basics settings here. These allow you to control when the pop-up appears on your site in ways that Pop-up Maker plugin itself doesn't. There are two things that we offer. One is preventing the page, all pop-ups, not just single pop-ups, from appearing on pages where the URL of the page matches URLs entered in this box. You can set individual plugins to not appear on certain pages, but if you want to prevent all plugins from appearing, using Pop-up Maker's default conditional setup, you'd have to edit every single plugin, every single pop-up on your site to make sure it doesn't show up on your donation page. Instead, what we do here is allow you to set a number of URLs or parts of a URL that if the URL that someone is visiting your site at matches these URLs, they won't see any Pop-up Maker pop-up on that page, no matter what the individual pop-up settings are. We also have the examples here that that I have set up are example.org/donate, the newsletter sign-up page, and also everything that matches the about page. Like if you have a top-level about page, but then it has some child pages like about staff, about donations, about our history. If the URL contains /about/ in it, it won't show up. And the blog post that we've just published on the Labs blog talks a little bit about it using the meow example, where the word meow shows up in certain, well, meow is not a common four-letter combination in English, but it shows up in the middle of homeowner, not homeyowner. So if you put in example.org/meow, then it'll only match example.org/meow and example.org/meow/woof. If you only use /meow/, it'll match /meow, /meow/woof, but also a post that has meow in its title. Its URL slug. If you don't have the slashes there, then it matches the previously mentioned things, but also a post that might not be what you're trying to prevent pop-ups on, and it also blocks it on the category archive page for home ownership, because home ownership contains the string meow in it. We also allow you to disable pop-ups based on, if people are coming to your site from MailChimp. How this works, if you've looked at MailChimp URLs, if you have click tracking enabled on your MailChimp campaign, you'll see something like this, where you'll have a UTM source with UTM campaign and UTM medium and UTM term. These are Google Analytics Universal Tracking Mechanism URL parameters. All you need is the UTM source argument, copy that, paste that into the settings so that everybody who comes to your source site with a URL parameter where UTM source is, say, nerd alert, they won't see MailChimp signup pop-ups. How do we determine what a MailChimp signup pop-up is? MailChimp signup pop-up is a pop-up that contains a MailChimp signup form. So let's set up an example. Julia, should I go through MailChimp for this one or just copy and paste the form that I have saved?
So go ahead and go to MailChimp.
All right. So I'm going to create a sign-up form for iNode's Nerd Alert newsletter. That's the newsletter that we put out every Friday with just stuff from us here at INN Labs. And let's find a list. We have where did it go? Got the Nerd Alert list. And we're going to create a sign-up form. To create a sign-up form for WordPress, you just use the embedded form option. And we're going to copy the code from the embed and put it on our site. Although actually, I'm going to limit this just so it's a little bit smaller. And I'm going to put it into this pop-up. Where did the pop-up go? All right, so I've got a MailChimp sign-up form here. And for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to remove the cookie and change this to show up after half a second. But it's still going to show up on the home page. So let's go to the home page of my example site. All right, so now we've got the pop-up appearing. It's a MailChimp sign-up form inside a pop-up. It's all it needs to be. But if we're coming from a site that, well, from MailChimp, then the URL is going to have a UTM source for Nerd Alert because someone clicked on a link in our pop-up, well, in our email. And in that case, what happens is the pop-up should not show up. How this works is it detects the ID of the form being the MailChimp embed form, well, MC embed signup. And if you look in the browser console, it'll say prevented, meaning the pop-up was told not to show up. You may want to do things like allow it to work for things other than the MailChimp signup form. If you read the WordPress.org plugin repository, frequently asked questions, we do have some guidance on modifying the selector that it uses, so it's not looking just for MailChimp forms. But that's something that a theme developer or a plugin developer will have to implement for you. We'd be happy to do that for you. Yes, so much for the MailChimp prevention or for the donation page prevention. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Any questions at all? Cool. Then we'll keep moving to the donation shortcut.
We have a question here from John. Can you preview a pop-up?
You preview a pop-up. You know, I've never tried. Let's see. Published draft. All right, so we'll make this pop up a draft. And hit preview. it does not appear that you can preview a pop-up. However, what you could do is change the condition here to only target a single post or a single page, and then say, okay, well, and visit that page with the pop-up enabled. You would see how it looks there.
The other thing you can do is test it on a private post,
That too.
and then it'll only show up for logged in users. Ben, do you think you could run through the pop-up themes
Yeah.
piece
All
of
right.
it?
So we've got this pop-up, the newsletter sign-up pop-up, and it's using the default theme. So we'll click Customize this theme. You can set the background, well, the overlay. Right now, the overlay is disabled, but the overlay would be the background between the plugin and your page content. You can set the background of the plugin. So we're going to turn this a faint pink, and you can see the preview happening here. Then border radiuses, let's give it nice round borders. With a dotted black border that's kind of thick.
With the warning not to go too crazy here,
Yes.
but just wanted to show that you can, in fact, modify these to fit with your branding and messaging for your site.
Okay. You can make it however you want. If you want fonts to match and your site doesn't quite match, but the fonts here don't quite match what your site uses, you can modify this using CSS. All you'll need is a way to edit the CSS on your site. You can do that through your theme. You can do that through Jetpack's style sheet editor. You can do that through practically any plugin that allows you to insert custom CSS. If you are, for some reason, loading CSS from like a development server, which we've seen happen before, you can edit the CSS there.
Yeah, you can also use the customizer on newer versions of WordPress.
That is true.
Cool. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just making a note of something to add to our docs. So any other questions about the theming or the pop-up plugin in general? All right. Then let's go to the Newsmatch donation shortcode plugin. This one is designed just to make it easier to use the News Revenue Hub with your site, creating a simple form that people can use. So again, we go return to the plugin settings. Again, we search for the plugin. And we've installed the plugin. The plugins, well, Newsmatch donation shortcodes settings are over here down in settings, Newsmatch shortcode. And there are a lot of settings. Some of them are for defaults that affect all of the shortcodes, and then the rest of it is setting the donor levels. The donor levels are you should configure to match your site's membership levels, so that if someone donates between $1 and $6, their membership level is the good ally. These are not default settings. These are settings that I was using during testing. Between $6 and $60, they become the good champion. Between $60 and $600, they become the good ambassador. Well, sorry, I'm misreading this. Between $60 and $600, they are the good champion. Between $600 and $6,000, they are the good ambassador. Although if they donate more than $6,000, they'll still be counted as the good ambassador. when you set the donation level name, you also set the article that the part of speech article that refers to a donor of that level. This is useful if you're referring to someone as an ally versus a friend, because we care about having pronouns match. For the organization name, you'll set that. You'll set your organization's Newsmatch ID, the default donation amount. Let's call it $50. You'll have to set the donation form URLs for the Newsmatch form. Newsmatch provides you with a live and a staging URL. You'll have to put both of those in and choose between staging and live. Use staging when you're testing the form. Switch to live when you are no longer testing the form. And if you're using a Salesforce campaign with this, you'll want to set your Salesforce campaign ID for the default Salesforce campaign ID. You can override that on a per shortcode basis. But let's save the settings and look at the actual shortcode. So here's a page that has all of the donation forms. Their shortcode comes in two forms, one with buttons and one with a drop-down. These are just how people choose how often they want their donation to occur, whether they want to give $50 per month, $50 per year, $50 just now and never again. But the options are same here and here. When you change your donation amount, that changes the text down here. This gift will make you a Go to Champion level, as opposed to, if you only gave, let's say, $6, then you're just a very entry-level donation member. When you click Give Now, they get taken to the Newsmatch form donation page to actually carry out the donation transaction. We do have the settings for the shortcode exist. You probably won't have to worry about them from that often, unless you want to choose between the button version or the type with the drop-down. You can also set the default donation amount if, for example, on some pages you want to suggest that people donate $3 per month, and on other pages you want to suggest that people donate $60 per month. You can also change the Salesforce campaign ID if you want to use different campaign IDs for different donation forms. It's up to you. So, does anyone have any questions about the donation shortcode? No? All right. Well, then I'll put a donation shortcode inside a pop-up so you can see how that works. Just going to copy the donation form shortcode, go back to the pop-ups. There's no way to copy a pop-up in the pop-up maker, which is sad. So I'm just going to add a new pop-up here, put the shortcode in. This pop-up will appear on, let's see. I'm going to have this pop-up appear on the About page. The trigger, it will automatically open after 500 milliseconds. Doesn't need a cookie. It will be a large pop-up with the overlay disabled. We'll slide in from the bottom center over 350 milliseconds. You want to check the fixed positioning box when you're creating a new pop-up. That way it stays at the bottom of the page as people scroll up and down.
Ben,
Yes.
you have a question that says, from Julie, that says, is that automatically set to take people to the Newsmatch page or a PayPal payment? I think she's referring to the pop-up. I'm not sure exactly what she's referring to.
The donation short code does automatically take people to the Newsmatch page, I believe.
It takes you to whatever page is set in the settings.
Yeah.
And it works with the News Revenue Hub and with the newsmatch.org page. So if you have all of your org URLs set correctly for that, it'll take you there. And then we are working on just a general PayPal and Stripe integration we'd like to do so that this is useful beyond Newsmatch as well.
All right, so now let's go check out this pop-up that we have just created. Remember that I'd set it to appear on the About page. It should be appearing, but it appears that it is not. Okay, well, this demonstration appears to have gone awry. It appears that the pop-up that I have just created is not appearing, which is sad because I wanted to show you how it worked. But apart from that, are there any questions? None at all. All right. So in that case, we'll have links to the blog posts out soon. Any other questions for us about Newsmatch or these plugins at all? Or I'll turn it back to Julia.
Cool, thanks, Ben. Well, we're wrapping up just a little bit early, but if you have any questions or more info, you can go to labs.inn.org where we are publishing tutorials for both of these as well as just general Newsmatch updates. So we'll be posting any sort of, whenever we release new updates to the plugins, you can find them there. You can also subscribe to our own newsletter, Nerd Alert, and we post plugin updates there every Friday as well. So if there's no other questions, thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Julia and Ben. I'm going to end the meeting now, so thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.